When 3-month-old Ryan was rushed to hospital as he had laboured breathing and was vomiting uncontrollably, it was found that his tiny body contained high levels of ethylene glycol and acetone, both compounds that are usually found in everyday household items such as nail polish remover and antifreeze. Sadly, just 3 months later, at 6 months old, baby Ryan would pass away from this poisoning, and his parents immediately became the prime suspects. His mother, Patricia, was arrested and charged for his murder and put in jail.
It infuriated me, and I was devastated. I was blown away. I just could not believe that they could even think. Ryan was my world. Ryan was so beautiful. He was perfect.
But during this time, she gave birth to another baby boy, David Jr. David Jr. was immediately put in state's hands, but when he also started showcasing the same symptoms as his older brother Ryan, everyone was confused and shocked. Had Patricia Stallings really poisoned her son Ryan? And had she somehow also poisoned her newborn baby, David Jr.? And if she had, why had she done it? Patricia was a young convenience store clerk in Jefferson County, Missouri, where a David Stallings would frequently come into her store, hoping to see her. The pair started dating soon after, in 1986, and not long afterwards, just 2 years later, they were married. The following year, in April of 1989, they welcomed their first son and named him Ryan. The young couple were thrilled, and their life seemed perfect as they settled into a beautiful little white house which overlooked Lake Wawanoka. But this idyllic life started to waver after baby Ryan started to get sick. On the evening of the 7th of July, 1989, young parents Patricia, who was nicknamed Patty, and David Stallings rushed their 3-month-old son Ryan to the Cardinal Glennon Children's Hospital in St. Louis, Missouri. Ryan was critically ill, his breathing was extremely laboured, he was lethargic and vomiting uncontrollably. Baby Ryan was admitted straight away to the pediatric intensive care unit. 24-year-old Patty described how her baby was hooked up to a respirator with all kinds of tubes going in and out of him. Both parents were in a state of total shock at seeing their little baby incapacitated in the way he was.
It was to the point where they said, well, they don't know how long he's going to be here. We don't know what's wrong with him yet, so you might as well just go to the waiting room and stay out there until we can tell you what's wrong.
Patty and David rented a hospital room so they could be near their son whilst doctors carried out a series of tests, including urine and blood.
He was, hooked up to a respirator and all kinds of tubes going in and out of him, and it was awful.
After 3 agonizing days, Ryan's parents were given the good news that their baby boy would recover, but that shockingly he had been poisoned. The complete medical examination included the use of a gas chromatography machine which noted high levels of ethylene glycol and acetone in his blood. Both compounds should never have been found at such high levels in a tiny baby, with acetone usually being found in nail polish remover and ethylene glycol typically being found in industrial solvents such as antifreeze. The lead pediatrician, Dr. Robert Lynch, contacted the Missouri Division of Family Services and the Sheriff's Department to let them know of their suspicions that Ryan had been poisoned. Patty, in a TV interview, would later say that the doctors were very polite but suspicious. The doctors signed an affidavit that they believed the child had been poisoned, and from that stage, baby Ryan was never left alone for the remainder of his hospital stay. 2 nurses or a doctor always had to be present, and Patty and David were swiftly separated and questioned by detectives. When asked if they had any nail polish remover in the home, David responded,
Patty uses it on her fingernails to remove her old fingernail polish. Do you have antifreeze? I said, yes, I have antifreeze. I just rebuilt the radiator on my vehicle, and I had a partial gallon left in the basement.
With such high concentrations of both chemicals in Ryan's blood, the police were in no doubt that he had been poisoned. The question remained, however, had it been David or Patty, or both? During questioning, detectives asked Patty if there were any problems at home, or if her and David were fighting. After 12 days in hospital, Ryan's condition finally improved, and he was released, but not to his parents. as David and Patty could not reasonably explain the exposure to both chemicals that Ryan faced. The baby was placed in protective custody, and David and Patty were furious, confused, and devastated.
A social worker come up to us and told us that they were taking custody of Ryan from us. And at that point, I became very angry. "Why are you doing this to us?" is what I told her. She said, "Well, this is policy. When there's a suspected poisoning, we take children from the parents and put them in foster care."
David and Patty's contact with Ryan was severely restricted, and they were only allowed to visit him every Thursday for just an hour. These supervised visits took place without any issue for the first 5 weeks, and it wasn't until their 6th visit that Ryan suffered another severe attack of vomiting just 3 days after seeing his parents. It was revealed during the investigation that during their parental visit on the 31st of August, Patty had been left alone with Ryan for a short time.
During that time, did actually feed the child a bottle. One bottle, which was identified as the bottle she had fed the baby with, actually contained traces of ethylene glycol. But the state believes that she slipped ethylene glycol or antifreeze into the bottle during that feeding.
Once again, tests concluded that Ryan had been poisoned with even higher levels of ethylene glycol found in his blood.
You cannot form ethylene glycol in your body. The body cannot naturally form that. Therefore, it has to be ingested. A child who's 4 months old doesn't have the capability of ingesting anything. Therefore, it had to be purposefully ingested.
Police wasted no time and swiftly apprehended David and Patty as they were getting out of their car at their home. They told them to stop right there and immediately put handcuffs on Patty, saying that she was under arrest for assault. Antifreeze was found by authorities in the basement of Patty and David's home. Whilst Ryan was being treated for ethylene glycol poisoning, his condition got so worse that doctors warned David that his son was close to death and that he should maybe be baptized. David tried to fight for Patty to be there, but the judge in charge of the case denied the request and responded, "No, absolutely not. I'm not going to let a baby killer up there." David stood up for his wife and said in return, "This lady did not kill this baby." At 6:30 p.m. on the 7th of September, doctors took little baby Ryan off of life support. He was not even 6 months old.
I told him, "Fine, go ahead and shut the machines down." But I wanted to be in there with him. So for 3 hours, I sat there with him in my arms, knowing that Patty couldn't be there, watching this meter on this machine go down each time his heart would beat. It was hard. It's something I would never ask anybody ever to do. Doctor came in. She took him from me and said, "It's over with. He's gone."
Whilst David had been around to say goodbye to his son, Patty was refused the opportunity to see her baby before he passed. She received a call at 9 p.m. from David, letting her know that Ryan was dead.
They called me back about 9 o'clock that night, and I went up to the phone, and it was David's voice, and he told me he died. And I started begging that he could come up and see me, and this deputy on duty said he could. So
Patty's charges were upgraded from assault to first-degree murder, and she was held without bail. Patty was not allowed to attend Ryan's funeral, but a few weeks later, after Ryan's death, Patty found out she was pregnant. Whilst Patty was awaiting her trial in jail, she underwent various tests, including mental and physical ones. She gave birth to her second son on the 27th of February, 1990, while still in prison. David Jr. was born 1 month premature in Madison County Hospital, and he was put directly in the hands of the state. David Sr. was devastated when he was not allowed to bring his new baby boy home. He had lost Ryan, Patty, and now baby David. When David Jr. was just 2 weeks old and still in the hands of the state, he started to experience the exact same symptoms as his older brother Ryan, only this time he hadn't been in contact with either his mother or his father. It would turn out, however, that having their second child put into the foster system would be the best thing that could happen to the family that had already been torn apart from the tragic death of Ryan and the incarceration of Patty. Without the removal of David Jr., they might once again have been accused of poisoning their second child. David Jr. was finally diagnosed with a rare genetic disorder named methylmalonic acidemia, or MMA. This genetic condition leads to the body producing a compound called propionic acid, a compound so similar to ethylene glycol that even the best medical experts in the field can easily misdiagnose them. Propionic acid only differs by one carbon atom from ethylene glycol. An independent medical expert would say,
"It would be very simple to confuse the diagnosis of MMA with multiple poisonings because the symptoms are very similar. MMA and other similar disorders are very rare, and the majority of doctors either will never have seen a case, or if they have seen a case, didn't know that they saw it and actually confused it."
As David Jr. had similar symptoms to Ryan before his death, it was expected that an MMA diagnosis for Ryan could also be possible, thereby absolving Patty of any blame.
I thought it was over, as far as the nightmare of being accused of hurting Ryan. I was positive that, even my lawyer said it was over. There was no way that they could not see the truth right in front of their eyes.
Patty Stallings' trial for the murder of her son Ryan took place in early 1991, where she was represented by defense attorney Eric Rathbone. On the 4th of March, Patty was found guilty of the murder of her son, and she was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole.
Everyone was saying there was ethylene glycol in the body. Tests from different laboratories showed that. Everyone agreed that if there's ethylene glycol in the body, it wasn't MMA that killed the child. I put on my witnesses. All of them said ethylene glycol. All of them said it had to be ingested. All the evidence pointed toward Patty Stallings. If somebody fed the baby antifreeze, it must have been her.
Whilst defense lawyer Eric Rathbone did try to tell the jury that Ryan could have died from natural causes, the Jefferson County prosecutor, George McElroy, responded, "You might as well speculate that some little man from Mars came down and shot him full of some mysterious bacteria." Patty's lawyer further failed to call forward any character witnesses to testify on her behalf. Even after Patty specifically requested he do so, she was convicted of first-degree murder and given a life sentence by Circuit Court Judge Gary P. Kramer without the possibility of parole.
I've lost one child to MMA. My second child is stricken with MMA and may not live. He's a year old now, and they're still not sure how to treat him. I lost my freedom. I've lost everything.
The following May of that same year, the Stallings' tragic case was featured in the TV show Unsolved Mysteries. This particular episode happens to be viewed by William S. Sly, a biochemist and professor at St. Louis University in Missouri. Dr. Sly immediately contacted the director of the metabolic screening lab at his university, Dr. James Shoemaker, indicating his concerns around the case. Both doctors were familiar with MMA and understood that the disease could easily be confused with poisonings due to the similar symptoms exhibited. Dr. Shoemaker approached the prosecutor in charge of the case, George McElroy, to understand what methods had been used during the investigation to measure the ethylene glycol allegedly found in Ryan's blood.
There was a compound that was very highly elevated in the serum, a compound called propionic acid, that comes off very close, but not identically, with ethylene glycol. And he and I speculated that that might be the basis of a misidentification that led to the incorrect diagnosis of ethylene glycol poisoning.
After receiving the information, Dr. Shoemaker quickly noticed that the propionic acid in Ryan's blood caused a result in the tests that to the careless observer might be mistaken for ethylene glycol. In reality, propionic acid is produced by those with MMA.
It was only when I found out that no one had really thoroughly explored the science behind the ethylene glycol testing that I became convinced that I had to do it myself.
To test his theory, Dr. Shoemaker sent samples of Ryan's blood to various laboratories who all used the same method to analyze the blood, as was used during the trial. Due to the rarity of MMA, some of the laboratories also came back with the wrong conclusion of ethylene glycol poisoning.
Sure enough, 3 out of the 7 laboratories that we tested came back with the positive results for ethylene glycol, when we knew the only thing in those samples was propionic acid.
The tragic thing is that no one bothered to actually superimpose the two
And when you look at it very closely and line up the injection point here and the internal standard here, the two peaks are actually quite different.
However, Dr. Shoemaker and Dr. Sly then approached Dr. Piero Rinaldo, a renowned geneticist at Yale University, who further confirmed that Ryan had died of MMA.
I received all the raw material from the labs where the tests were done. I couldn't believe how low was the quality of the analytical work done in the commercial lab. The retention time of the peak in question was 33 seconds later, which in gas chromatography is an enormous difference, especially in a case obviously with legal implications. It must be perfect match. This was not even close. It was, again, absolutely strikingly obvious evidence that there was no match.
Dr. Rinaldo quickly contacted the lead prosecutor for the case, McIlroy, and informed him of his worrying results. Upon realizing that an innocent woman might wrongly be imprisoned, Patty was released from jail on the 30th of July, just 4 months into her sentencing, and she was placed on house arrest.
After the Unsolved Mysteries aired, people were writing and calling and just wanting to know, how can we help? And I can't thank those people enough because, through all of that, wheels started turning and everything just started pushing forward really fast.
A new trial was ordered on the grounds of inadequate legal defense. However, after 3 months under house arrest, all charges were finally dismissed in September of 1991, finally ending 2 years of injustice. A press conference was held on the 20th of September of that year, where McElroy personally apologized to the Stallings family for the 2 years of pain that had been caused.
The state of Missouri is dismissing all pending charges against Patricia Stallings based upon the death of her child, Ryan, and I'm satisfied, I'm convinced that Patricia Stallings did not poison her child.
Dr. Shoemaker and Dr. Sly successfully published a paper with their findings to the scientific community outlining how the symptoms of MMA could be easily confused with ethylene glycol poisoning. Scientists believe that various errors in the testing might have further contributed to the incorrect diagnosis of poisoning. Firstly, the false ethylene glycol readings in Ryan's bottle is believed to be simply due to how the bottle was washed. Additionally, the crystals that were found in Ryan's brain are now believed to have been caused by the ethanol drip the doctors gave to him when they were first trying to combat the suspected poisoning.
None of the series of events in the last 2 years would have happened. It all depended on whether he was correctly diagnosed, which he was not.
In 1993, the Stallings successfully won a settlement against Cardinal Glennon Children's Hospital, St. Louis University Hospital, and SmithKline Beecham Clinical Laboratories, all who had been involved with testing Ryan's blood during the trial. They were awarded several $1 million, but the couple unfortunately struggled with the impact of this stressful time and later divorced. Patty has said in interviews that she managed to keep hope after being wrongly imprisoned due to her Buddhist faith, which helped to keep her focused and motivated. Despite the public apology by McIlroy following her release, the Stallings donated $10,000 to his opponent, Robert Wilkins, when the re-election for Jefferson County prosecutor took place in 1994, and Robert Wilkins went on to win the election.
I can understand a person who's been through all that she went through, finding an apology pretty lacking, but I had a job to do. I had the evidence before me that I felt gave me no choice.
Patty was able to partially have her criminal record expunged, as state law still required some information on felony charges to be kept indefinitely, even in cases where the person had been acquitted or the case was dismissed.
He is a miracle child, and we're lucky to have TJ, and we have our whole life back. It's like we're starting over.
Tragically, Patricia and David lost their second son, David Jr., nicknamed DJ, in 2013 at the young age of 23, and then Patty lost David in 2019 after a long illness. David and Patricia experienced so much injustice in the most difficult of times. They were not able to freely mourn the death of their son Ryan. Instead, they were dragged through the legal system and wrongly accused for his murder. To have to go 2 years with the world thinking you killed your child must be completely unimaginable, particularly the part where she was not allowed to properly grieve the loss of her son, as she was banned from his funeral. Thankfully, the case has now highlighted to medical professionals the possibility of MMA being confused with ethylene glycol poisoning, and it hopefully won't ever destroy another family. It's so amazing to think that the birth of David Jr. cleared his mother, but it's also crazy knowing that if he had never been born, Patricia would probably still be in prison today, behind bars for something she did not do.
DJ's birth is what saved her, because the first child's diagnosis would never have been made.
As always, my heart goes out to Patricia, who lost both her sons way too young, and who had her time with baby Ryan robbed from her. I'm glad that once she was released, she was able to live a somewhat normal life and be a somewhat carefree mother to David Jr. I hope that wherever she is today, Patricia is doing okay. And as always, rest in peace, David Jr., David Sr., and Ryan.